Good evening, good evening. Thank you for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started this evening with our joint public hearing for April. So starting with, and thank you, council members, thank you all of our alert members for joining us. First, we'll start with the adoption of the agenda. Any changes to tonight's agenda, questions, comments, or motion to adopt?
Motion to adopt.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Majority approves, motion carries. We'll go with the agenda as is for the evening, starting with ZMA-4-25, overlook at Old Cruise.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council, members of the Land Use Review Board. I have before you tonight ZMA 425, which is the overlook on Old Cruise. What I'd like to do tonight is kind of give you an overview of the project, a profile, the timeline for the project, go over some of the site plan and some of the analysis we've done, including the transportation analysis, review the water allocation policy, go through the plan unit development, and finalize looking at site development analysis, or site development allowances, and then looking at the comprehensive plan consistency. So with that being said, this is the vicinity map and site profile. You'll notice on the aerial photo here, there's a large pond on the site. As we go through the site plan analysis, that's a large part of the amenity to keep that pond and make it part of the amenity package. The property is on Old Cruise Road, just south of the Copart, just east of Brio and north of Brio, which is under development right now. Currently zoned rural transition, just under 30 acres. Looking at the surrounding zoning, Copart zone manufactured industrial. Brio is a neighborhood mixed use plan unit development as well as a general residential 3 plan unit development, and there is some residential and agricultural land surrounding it zoned rural transition. This is the proposed master plan. Again, it's 30 acres, approximately 131 lots, total proposed density of 4.3 units per acre, which equates to a general residential 8 zoning district. They are requesting a general residential 8 planned unit development. All of the public notification requirements have been met to hold the public hearing this evening, including sending out first-class letters, signs posted on the property, and a legal ad published in the Wake Weekly. On the project timeline, we are at the Town Council joint public hearing. So prior to this, there has been a neighborhood meeting. There have been development review committee review, as well as pre-application meeting and sketch plans reviewed with the developer. Next steps would be a LURB recommendation and a Town Council final decision. There was a neighborhood meeting held back in December. It was one of those odd nights where we were expecting some winter flurries. So we did hold the neighborhood meeting due to the timing of the storm at East Regional Library next door, but the developer did offer any neighbor who wished to have a follow-up meeting just in case they weren't safe to travel that evening. There were 2 neighbors attended, and topics included buffers and firearm discharge on agricultural land. The Development Review Committee saw this in February. They voted unanimously to continue it until the Town Council made a decision on the rezoning application. There were still some comments to be addressed around roadway infrastructure, some dimensional requirements, pedestrian connectivity, and recreational open space. So the proposal going into the site plan analysis is for 3 product types, 3 different product types, 56 single-family rear-loaded lots, which are depicted by the blue on this map. So that's kind of the lot size for those. 30 front-loaded townhomes, which are depicted in the red on the map on the screen. And then 45 rear-loaded townhomes that are 22 feet wide, depicted by the green on the screen. You can see the roadway there is a collector street on our collector street map that is median divided 2-lane collector avenue section. Looking at environmental protection, floodplains and wetlands and stream buffers are protected up to 6.68 acres or 22% of the overall site, including that pond I talked about earlier, and some natural overlooks as well. There is a required 20-foot type B buffer for the Copart side. There's a privacy fence already there, so we're kind of working with the applicant to determine if there's a necessity for additional screening for the future residents. Copart is a automobile salvage operation. They don't have a salvage yard anymore necessarily there, but they do have from time to time storage of vehicles. And so just to lessen that visual impact of those incompatible land uses, try to increase the buffer a little bit there. For the open space, it includes several amenities, including greenway trails, a playground, gathering areas with seating, fitness stations, an enhanced landscaping, and a scenic overlook. A total of 13.7 acres. It also includes natural trails around the pond and a fishing pond that I think we'll get to in a minute. Parking is provided on street. Approximately 66 on-street parking spaces are provided. And because of the size of this, there is no TIA required. Again, the roadway network plan does have that future avenue section, and the side path and greenway plan calls for a side path along Old Cruise Road or multi-use path. And so if you've been down Old Cruise Road recently, you can see it starting to come to life through the Brio subdivision, and this will continue that same treatment north. For the water allocation policy, they have met the requirements for water allocation. They need a minimum of 50 points. They have achieved 51 points through such things as public art, conservation of habitats, exclusive use of native species, zero-scaping techniques, contributing to the affordable Knightdale plan, and using enhanced landscaping and hardscaping. So with that, we'll kind of go through the plan unit development. Again, just as a reminder, because it's a plan unit development with a general residential 8 base district, they are the GR8 district standards must be met unless alternative provisions are proposed. And the council, as well as the Land Use Review Board, can request but not require additional conditions on that plan. Looking at site development allowances, the first is a common one we see, which is to our lot dimensions. So the lots are required to be 80 for front-loaded lots and 30 for rear-loaded lots. They are proposing 80, 24, and 22, as we talked about. And then we'll have, and then also the townhomes to have the 24 front-loaded as well. They're also requesting a site development allowance for our setback requirements. We have a required front setback of 10 feet. They're requesting that to remain, but to adjust the corner side minimum, and rear minimum for these lots. They're also requesting that the 30 townhomes that are front-loaded be front-loaded. Our UDO requires them to be rear-loaded. Any townhome to be rear-loaded by an alley in the rear. And then they are asking for a site development allowance to the avenue cross-section to reduce the cross-section by a foot or so to accommodate on-street parking. There's not really another place for them to provide for guest and resident parking. And then they are asking for a site development allowance to the required distribution of uses. We require a certain number of units in this distribution, and they're requesting that they have 57% townhomes and 43% single family as their required distribution of uses. Looking at the architectural elevations, they have proposed several conditions around architecture. These are voluntarily committed to by the developer. We do have a few recommendations for consistency improvements as well as clarity to make sure they are enforceable once, if this was to be approved, that they would be something that could be administered by our planning folks. I won't go through them all, but the single-family architectural standards are fairly common to what we see. They also have included the townhome architectural standards, which are fairly common to what we see. So moving to comprehensive plan analysis. As you know, prior to taking any action on a rezoning, the town council is required to adopt a statement describing whether the plan is consistent with the comprehensive plan and whether it's reasonable and in the public interest. And so looking at the comp plan in a little deeper, this is on the intentional growth areas map in a target growth area. We have a very long description of what that is, but kind of talks about areas that can accommodate growth for the 11-year planning horizon of this plan. So we did anticipate to grow into this area during this plan horizon. It also talks about having different districts, neighborhood centers, mixed-use districts, as well as reimagining kind of the future and introducing new energized activity centers. Looking at the urban small town framework map, this is on a rural preservation corridor as well as within a neighborhood activity center. And so the rural preservation corridor talks about the current kind of status of these rural corridors, and as they develop over time, how can we kind of memorialize that and keep that feeling as you're riding down the road, not to have a sharp transition directly into more of an urban built environment. This is usually achieved through wide side paths that may meander, as you see in the Brio application. You'll also have increased landscaping. You'll have existing landscaping preserved usually, as well as fencing and other things that kind of nod to the rural heritage of the area. And then this is a neighborhood activity center, which looks at small mixed-use destinations close to residential neighborhoods throughout the town's planning area. This is meant to be really neighborhood serving as a neighborhood activity center. It speaks to, having some single-family housing and some standalone residential in it, but really serving as an overall neighborhood activity center in the comprehensive plan. And you can see here it is a neighborhood center place type. And as you're aware, in our comprehensive plan, we kind of have spreads that dictate how those should develop. It includes things about street and block patterns, as well as open space, building types and massing, transportation improvements, sustainability, and infill development and redevelopment, which is more applicable in a closer infill environment. And on the future place type transect map, those neighborhood centers are kind of the very beginning of what we consider our activity center. So they would be the smallest level of activity center. So you'd expect a transition from neighborhoods, mixed-use neighborhoods, to more of a denser neighborhood activity center with small-scale neighborhood serving retail and services. So looking at the guiding principles, this has an opportunity to advance two of those guiding principles as we've evaluated the home and neighborhood choices. There are three unique product types in this development, so they're providing a lot of choice within the development. And then planned and orderly growth, as this was one of our target growth areas. We plan to grow in this area during the time of this comprehensive plan, and so this is kind of part of the plan, if you will. Looking at the affordable Knightdale plan, this has the opportunity to advance kind of three of the parts of it. One is the developer has committed to providing contributions to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and they're also providing missing middle housing through providing townhomes. Also looking at the livable neighborhoods, this would build some pedestrian connectivity to some of the existing neighborhoods in the area and could potentially support and help support a neighborhood activity center in this area if there was to be redevelopment of existing uses, et cetera. And looking at strategic plan consistency in the SAFE one, it's just ensuring that resources are aligned with our continued growth, ensuring that multimodal transportation choices are there for connected and inclusive, and looking at sustainable, looking at quality commercial and residential development, as well as executing the plan. Reviewing the comprehensive parks and recreation master plan, this is within the service area of several park facilities, including the Wakestone Athletic Park, Knightdale Station Park, and Knightdale Community Park. So that concludes my presentation. I am happy to answer any questions that you have from the council or the Land Use Review Board. But following those questions for staff, we will open the public hearing. We'll give the applicant an opportunity to provide their comments, and then we'll have an opportunity for the general public to provide their comments. And after that, I'll come back up and make a recommendation.
All right. Thank you so much. First, bringing it to the council. Any questions, comments?
Jason, can you go back to the developer requested allowances? Okay, so I know we've done a decent amount along Old Cruise. This just seems still excessively tight. I know a lot of this property is restricted from, is undevelopable, but going from an 80-foot to a 24-foot just seems dense. What do you recall? What was the lot widths for the development we had just down from this one on Old Cruise of townhomes? Do you?
I don't recall, but they're roughly in that range,
Roughly in that
24.
for the townhomes.
Yeah.
But we didn't have any single family in those, didn't we? They were all townhomes, right?
There's some single family in that as
Okay.
well. Yep.
Okay. Okay, I just needed to see that. One question though, back to when they did have the residential meeting, just interestingly regarding the firearm discharge. I know Wake County has a general buffer zone for the Wake County area in terms of discharge, and as we encroach more into those agricultural areas, how does this impact that from, I mean, I'm assuming that's not something that's grandfathered in, right? So we do have still a significant amount of agricultural land in and around this. That discharge allowance, how does it impact when we get to encroachments like this?
Yeah, so once the development is built out and there's occupied residential units there, then the firearms ordinance of Wake County would take effect, and I believe it's a 300-foot separation from occupied unit to firearm. It may have been extended, but that's the number I'm coming up with in my head, but yes.
All right.
I think it has to be occupied dwelling unit, so once it's full. Yep.
At this time, we will open it up for the applicant to speak.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and members of LURB. My name is John Myers. I'm with JPM South Development and representing the ownership group here today. We also have with me is Luke Turner from Kimley Horn. So hopefully if there's any questions that come up between the two of us, we can get those answered. Jason, thank you. Staff Holes does a great job of presenting, and so we appreciate that. We want to spend a couple minutes just talking about the thought process that went behind the plan to get us kind of to where we are today. And I think when one looked at the plan that Jason pulled up, we definitely have a lot of constraints with this plan. Roughly 45% of it is unusable, which is either wetlands, buffers, or area that we really can't get to without significant environmental impacts, which we really wanted to try and avoid. So a lot of topography here as well. And then we also have a collector road that cuts right through it from west, going from west to east. And so there were fairly limited options, I think, in terms of design flexibility in what we did here. And then I think as we looked at it, we also recognized we have to absorb the cost of about 1,300 feet of collector road and significant frontage improvements. We needed to get enough density to be able to actually absorb all of that as well. So trying to really balance a number of things on the front end and turn it into an attractive community at the end of the day. We'll look at the land plan here in just a second, but what we see up here is what is up against Co-Park today. And I think there had been a question raised earlier about, buffering against Co-Park. How do we do that? There's a lot of large natural vegetation there today, as well as an 8-foot opaque fence. Our intent would be to come in and supplement any areas that look like they didn't have enough density of vegetation, because we want an opaque landscape buffer at the end of the day as well, in addition to the 8-foot fence that's there. So it is something that's important to us. And we did meet with the Co-Park ownership group several times during the course of the process to just share our plans and what we're thinking about doing along the way. So we've been very transparent with them through the process. How do I get to the next slide? Do I just hit the forward button? There we go. All right. So this is the overall plan. And so what we really wanted to do here is try and really accomplish two things. One, we're not part of Brio, but at the same time, if we look at what's been approved already right to the south of us with Brio, and then immediately to the west with Old Mill Bernie, that's all part of the Brio plan today. We're really sort of a hole in the donut with what's left. And we wanted to make sure that what we proposed here was very much in keeping with what's already been approved in terms of the quality of development, and it all sort of flowed seamlessly. So there's a number of components to that. One is what we're doing along Old Cruise Road. So our fencing and buffering and landscaping is intended to mirror what's happening, what's already been approved. So again, it feels seamless. We don't want this to feel out of place. The architectural commitments that we're making here, again, almost identical to what was approved in those other communities, again, speaking to the consistency and the quality. The product offerings are similar in that there's a lot of overlap here as well. We're proposing 3 types be allowed here. We are asking for some flexibility in terms of potentially changing out some product types going forward, depending on what the market is looking for. But the intent is to have multiple product opportunities here. The front load townhouses that back up to Old Cruise, that again is virtually identical to what has been approved already right down the street in Brio. So again, looking to keep that consistency through the corridor so it feels good as one drives through there. And I think a question had been raised about just the lot dimensioning and setbacks. Again, that's all very consistent with what was approved at Old Mill Bernie and what was approved at Brio. So again, just very, very consistent. The other thing that we wanted to really pay attention to as well is those are both amenity-rich communities. We wanted also to be amenity-rich here, but do it in a little different way. We have 14, 15 acres of natural area, and so we said, how do we do something a little different? Let's really accentuate and make that natural area accessible, usable, bring it in so that people have a amenity that's a little different than a standard pool clubhouse. Jason had mentioned the pond. It's a nice 2-acre pond. We could have drained it. We opted not to. So we're keeping the pond and instead incorporating it into the overall amenity package for the community to be utilized by the residents. So those are things that we were trying to focus on, and in terms of the natural areas and accentuating those, it's a combination of preservation, limiting impacts, ponds being preserved. We do have a small impact through the center of the site, but that's because based on co-park drainage over the years, there's a small wetland finger that goes up to the north that we'll have to impact in order to be able to cross it with roads. But I don't know the exact percentage, but we're probably not touching 95% of the natural areas and buffers and wetlands that are on the site. So we're really making a conscious effort to preserve there. And then we wanted to integrate an interesting amenity offering here. And so this slide speaks to that a little bit, and it's really kind of a multi-pronged. You can see the pond there, which really is the focal point of this amenity. And then we have up in the upper left corner, that's an overlook seating area, because the way the site falls off topographically, there'll be some nice view corridor opportunities there, just looking out over the pond and over the natural area. And then we have a children's playground that's there with a little circle in the square, and this is all connected by walkways. And you'll follow a walkway down around the pond. We'll have a gazebo and a covered seating picnic area. We will have a dock that will be fishing and seating that is will project out into the pond, and then you can follow the trail around, and then you'll see a sort of circular with a square off to the right. That's a natural trail with fitness stations that will loop all around the base of that larger knoll, and then there will be a covered seating area up on top of that as well. So combination of a lot of activities that we're looking to integrate here, and to do it all in kind of a natural type of a setting. So this gives you a little idea as to the fishing dock and what that might look like there with that picture in the upper right corner. That pond actually kind of looks quite similar size-wise to what we'll have here as well. So the scale is probably pretty good. And then an example of a pavilion. You can see on this plan here where the dock would be located, again, off of a hard surface trail. And then right up from it would be covered pavilion, picnic tables, grilling. So a lot of things to do here. And this is that knoll that I'd mentioned as well, with a natural trail all around the perimeter of it, and then a seating area up top, fitness stations around the trail. So we'll have hard surface, we'll have more natural surface trails, fitness stations, kids play area, outdoor grilling, fishing dock, really all focused on outdoor type activities. And the plan would be for the furnishings themselves to have more of a rustic sort of a look, as you can see here, which again would sort of fit into the overall theme of natural area preservation, et cetera. So that is kind of a bit of a glimpse in terms of what we're trying to do here and trying to accomplish, and to create something that's high quality, blends in with the area, but still has its own sense of uniqueness too. So appreciate your time and consideration, and we're happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you for sharing. Are there any questions for the applicant?
With regard to parking near your amenities, I must have missed the description. Where is the parking for, say, going to the pond?
There is not dedicated parking for the pond because of the size of the community and the compactness. Everything is very walkable. So it is not set up necessarily to have the dedicated parking space for the pond or the fishing pier.
That goes along with the thought of how does this design serve the purposes to allow the neighbors that are existing, not the residents that would be coming, the existing infrastructure, how would they be served if there's only walkability?
Well, so the amenity here is not designed for the greater area as a whole. If Brio were to decide they wanted to incorporate them together, then the usage might expand outside of the community. We do have, I think as Jason mentioned, connectivity going down Old Cruz. We will tie all of our walkways to what's happening in Brio down the street on Old Cruz, so there will be that connectivity, but the amenities are private in the sense that they are meant for the community and not for overall public use, which is similar really to what is in Old Mill Bernie and Brio as well. Those amenities are typically more private neighborhood amenities.
Lining up for guiding principles here, I am curious about your reasoning to have front-loaded lots.
Couple reasons for it, really. A, it's product differentiation, which we always find to be a good thing. Secondly, buyers, consumers like front-loaded townhome lots. There's value in that sense as well. And then also, as we run parallel to Old Cruz, we didn't want to have alleys that just ran parallel to Old Cruz. And so that was another reason to go front load as well. And that was a lot of the reasoning behind the front load towns that were approved previously in Brio too, was to not have garages fronting back out onto Old Cruz and an alleyway facing onto Old Cruz. This is a much cleaner streetscape, in our opinion, would be to bring those internal. And that's why they're shown just in that location. They're not anywhere else in the community. It's just right along Old Cruz.
My last question is for staff. I believe out of the 8 guiding principles, your report said it only met the home and neighborhood choices principle. Is that correct?
I think we identified 2, so the expanded home and neighborhood choices, as well as, let me review this real quick. Oh, there it went. The planned and orderly growth. So this isn't in the target growth area, and so it's an area we envision growing into during this time. There's water and sewer infrastructures in place or will be in place as part of the Brio expansion, so that those are the two that we have identified.
Thank you. All right. Any additional questions before we open it up to, you have a question? Mhm.
Two questions. First, just curious, is there going to be a fence around the playground? And how close is it really to?
Typically, all of our playgrounds are fenced, yes.
And then can you justify the reason behind the allowance of 80 feet to 24?
So the 80-foot is a depth, the 24 is a width. So you two different dimensions there. Okay, and now the lots as they're drawn right now, most of them are 100 feet and some of them are 90 feet. There's nothing that's 80 feet on the plan today. But again, when one sets standards, you try and give yourself a little bit of wiggle room in case something doesn't quite work out, but there are two different dimensions. The 80-foot is a depth. And, yep.
And then I guess the last thing is more of a comment and a request. So I see the different elevation options or design standards you have for the single-family homes and the townhomes, and they're comparable to what has been approved in previous neighborhoods. Is it possible by the time that this does come to LURB that this is niched down to some matching design concepts so we can really see the full scope of the character of the neighborhood?
That is difficult, and just reason being, until there's a builder in place, it's difficult for a developer to commit to actual specific elevations because each builder brings something a little different to the table. If you set guidelines for them, they find a way to take what they've got, if it doesn't quite match, and tweak it and make changes so that it fits the guidelines. But I wouldn't want to bring something to the table and say, these are the elevations, this is exactly what's going to get built, because we don't know just yet. And nobody really does on the front end until there's a builder in tow.
And so this is new for me to know that there's a design before a builder. How soon do you think you would have a builder in place? Would that be after this is approved, or?
It typically is. It's pretty rare that a builder is in place before something gets approved, and part of that is, as a developer, I can't even bring a builder in and commit to something that doesn't exist until it's actually approved. So we look to get the rights and the entitlements in place first, and then move it towards market once we know what we actually have to sell. And that would be based on what's approved. But that's why we do spend a good bit of time on the architectural detailing and try and get the all of the different descriptions as accurate as we can, and staff does a good job of kind of pinning us into a fairly narrow band. So there isn't a whole lot of guesswork as to the quality, but there's enough flexibility to where it would work for a number of different potential builders. And also just, I think something that is important, this will be an HOA governed community, so there will be formal architectural guidelines, there will be formal governance of what gets built. So there is a lot of oversight through that whole process to make sure that what ultimately goes vertical in a neighborhood like this, that it matches up with what has been approved as part of a zoning or conditions.
Question. Was there any consideration given to mixed use within this footprint, this development? And can you walk us through your thought process on that?
Sure. We did think about it, but one of the challenges that we've got here, Oops, am I going the wrong way?
Other way.
Oh, other way, all right.
Lower button, switch button.
Oh. Oh, I'm messing this all up. I'm just trying to get back to the land plan here. There we go. So if you look at the plan here, you have that collector road that I mentioned early on, and you can see where that sits. And that tie point there on Old Cruise is fixed. That intersection is already in place and going to be constructed. So that's where we have to tie, and then going out to the east, you have Mr. Puryear's property immediately east of us, and then you have the Brio age restricted on the other side. So there's another piece of this road that's built on Brio, age restricted, it comes in from this direction. So we're really limited with what we can do with that road and where it goes. What that does is it leaves you little narrow strips that make it difficult to do anything non-residential on those, because it's difficult to get a footprint, and also if you don't get enough critical mass of whether it be commercial or retail or whatnot, then it's very hard to drive business. So we did talk about that. We did talk with staff extensively about that as well, and whether it was even practical to try and do something there, and we could not get there. You know, there is a small commercial piece at the front of Brio. I want to say it's 7 or 8 acres, the Brio age restricted. It's a very square parcel, a little easier to do something on that type of a parcel of land than with what we have here. So, but it was discussed pretty extensively.
All right. Any additional? All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
At this time, we will open the floor for public comment. This is a public hearing item. If there's anyone here tonight who wishes to speak on this item, you may come forward. Please make sure that you have signed the speaker sheet located at the entry table. Comments are limited to three minutes. We do have a timer at the end here that will indicate when the time has expired. Large groups are asked to designate a spokesperson. When at the podium, please be sure to state your name and address for the record.
Fred Puryear, 8100 Buffalo Road. I was that person in the public meeting. You asked how far. You did not get an answer. It's 300 yards. So yes, it affects me big time, because you've took away almost a quarter mile is what you've done. When this happens, it was a town council of Knightdale that suggested this to Wake County. And I also asked for the fence to keep people off of my property, because even now, as they're trying to develop, for some reason, it just sure is hard to keep things on their property.
Thank you for sharing and thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else here tonight who wishes to speak on this item? If not, I'll bring it back to council. Last questions or comments? Or alert members, last questions or comments? All right. If not, is there a motion?
I got just a couple of quick comments. I would certainly encourage the developer to pursue additional points on our, or not points, but additional guiding principles in our comprehensive plan. We've certainly seen some successful neighborhoods that have recently been approved that have been able to achieve that without messing with the actual design of the site. There's some things like ADUs being allowed by right, not blocked by the HOA. I like the comment about it being kind of a donut hole in Brio, which I think, we've made comments about the density. It feels packed in, even if it is a similar density to some of the places that are inside Brio. And I wonder if there's an opportunity to potentially look at different building styles that might allow the residential density that you're looking for without using the same land area. That to allow for more open space. So that's just kind of my observations. Is there's opportunities to chase more comprehensive plan goals, more open space, particularly looking at the keyhole aspect of it in Brio and the neighborhood zone, neighborhood business zone. All right, I make a motion to close the joint public hearing, refer ZMA 425 to the Land Use Review Board for recommendation and advisory statement.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Majority approves. Motion carries. We'll move to ZTA-1-26, transportation update. Mr. Foley.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and members of LURB. For those who don't know me, my name is Tucker Foley. I'm a senior transportation planner here in the Development Services Department under Jason. So I'm here tonight to present ZTA-1-26, which is a staff-led text amendment, the first of the year, to amend the procedures of our TIA process, our Transportation Impact Analysis. This is adding the potential for an additional requirement to this process, which is a requirement as part of the master plan submittal of developments of a certain size. So with that, the ZTA timeline, I presented this initially to Town Council at their work session last week. Obviously here tonight at joint public hearing, and if everything goes well tonight and there's not substantial revisions needed, this will go to both LURB and Council next month. So to frame the scope of the text amendment tonight, I think it's important to recap the last text amendment to this section of the UDO. That would be ZTA 1-1-24. This was about 2 years ago. It touched a lot of areas within the UDO regarding TIAs. The top three most relevant to tonight's change is that it reestablished what the acronym means. It means 20 different things, but here in Knightdale, we now call it a transportation impact analysis, from what elsewhere is commonly referred to as just a traffic impact analysis. The point of that being that we're really wanting to take a look more at all roadway users. It's not just cars, it's pedestrians, bicyclists, everyone who's on the roadway. The other two changes are very similar to what's being proposed tonight. It is additions that reserve the right for additional requirements to be enforced. Not necessarily outright required, but in areas where they are applicable and where they are needed, they can be added to the process. The two main takeaways are requiring site distance analysis to be considered. This is naturally considered as part of the construction drawing process. However, as I mentioned before, a TIA is prepared as part of the master plan process. This catches it earlier in the process and ensures that the proposed driveway connections to our existing roadway network are safe and you have sufficient vision down the road to make safe maneuvers. The second of which being the ability to require a bicycle pedestrian analysis in those TIAs. The aim of that is to fill in gaps in the sidewalk network, maybe put in additional crossings to better connect the roadway network beyond just cars. So, as I mentioned, in the very similar vein, this is to allow the requirement of crash data analysis as part of the TIA process. So the section of the UDO that this pertains to is Section 12, Administrative Standards, subsection 12.3, Development Plan Requirements, and furthermore, subsection J, the TIA section. The town of Knightdale has a number of unique requirements above and beyond the status quo of other municipalities, all of which are listed on there. 2 of which are required, 2 of which are optional, and this would be a third optional item. So the purpose of this, so the town conducted and adopted the Safety Action Plan at the end of 2024. This might be a little hard to read, but there was 28 action items that were identified as part of that plan for the town to continue to act upon and demonstrate its commitment to safety, especially in regards to Vision Zero. And so these are 4 of those 28 action items that this text amendment serves to further. Many of these action items we've already achieved, many we're working on now. The top one there, I-7, which stands for implementation, It says to continue using the TIA process intentionally, or to intentionally identify opportunities for new development to include multimodal facilities. That first half was completed by the previous text amendment. The second half of that statement, which is including the potential for additional safety improvements for projects along the high injury network or near the site of a past fatal or serious injury crash. That second half of that statement is what this text amendment seeks to check off, so to speak. So why is this being added to the TIA process, or why is it being proposed to be added? Because generally a TIA, as I mentioned, commonly referred to as just a traffic impact analysis, is really just focused on capacity. Cars are getting bottlenecked somewhere, whether it's a signal, whether it's a stop sign, you put in a turn lane, maybe you add a signal, maybe you add a roundabout. It's just about getting people through the intersection. It's not really concerned about safety. Maybe those improvements might have safety impacts, but that's not the focus of it. It never really addresses unsafe conditions, people speeding, lack of signage, unsafe roadway conditions, overly sharp turn, or adequate lighting. So this would help to include that in the conversation of these studies. Shown here on the map, or shown here on the slides, are two maps from the safety action plan. You'll see these throughout my presentation tonight. These are the high injury network and crash hotspot map. So wherever you see color is bad. Darker red, obviously, is where there is more intensity. Any corridor that is shaded is a corridor that is, less safe than average. And anywhere where you see a concentration of color there is where crashes predominantly happen in town. So you'll notice any interchange in our main roadways like Knightdale Boulevard tend to have the most crashes. So lost my train of thought. This amendment and requiring crash data analysis as part of the TIA process is not new. It's just not something that's super widespread. So if we take a look at the Campo region, of the municipalities there's only 3 currently that have this added to their UDO, and only 2 regularly require this as part of their TIAs. Town of Knightdale, us being the only municipality at this point who has an adopted safety action plan. Raleigh is working on theirs, expects to be adopted later this year, and Campo as a whole did their blueprint for safety. But the purpose of this is we are already a leader in the safety sphere. We're already very committed to Vision Zero, just continuing to lead the charge on that. And looking outside of the Campo region, aside from Johnson County and Durham, most other municipalities that have such a requirement are located in the western part of the state. So on a very high level, just looking at Raleigh and Cary, who are the 2 in our Campo region that have this requirement, Raleigh's process is very high level in general. It's not always the most effective in having an actionable outcome, whereas Cary's is very involved, but it is very effective. So I won't dive into the specifics of those, but I think there are positives of both programs that you'll see later tonight that I've proposed that we can kind of blend the 2 together. So shown on screen here is an example deliverable of Raleigh's crash data analysis within their TIA. It's really not a big lift. It can take up less than a single page of the 30-page document. It's information that can be requested from DOT and provided free of charge, and it can be summarized in a table like is shown here, based on a per intersection list. The same study area that matches the TIA, just categorizing crashes based on year or crash type. This is a lot of information, but it also doesn't really paint a great picture at the same time. You'll see in the write-up here that it identifies that there's a trend of rear-end crashes. It says that that's typical of a signalized intersection, which is true, and then basically says that there's nothing that can reasonably be done by the developer at this time. Areas for improvement that I believe can kind of blend between Raleigh and Cary would be to separate out bicycle and pedestrian crashes, speak more to fatal and serious injury crashes. This gives you a summary and says that there were no fatal crashes. There's no more investigation into it other than that, as well as looking at the severity index of these crashes. Were these just fender benders? Were these more serious? Identify patterns. In this report, it's very summarized cleanly within the actual TIA, but the data behind it that you have access to goes into the nitty-gritty of everything involved with the crash. Was it raining? What time of day was it? Was the driver wearing a seatbelt? Was somebody inebriated? There are more patterns that can be drawn from the information than is just typically done so. So the initial concept that I have for you tonight that I'm looking for feedback on is, as is kind of industry standard, looking at the most recent 5 years of data, doing an initial screening with information from our comprehensive transportation plan and our safety action plan to vet intersections and areas around the proposed development that might warrant further investigation, and if so, require that as part of the study, and required the consultant that's preparing the TIA to attempt to recommend improvements that can improve safety. Not necessarily putting that burden on the development community, but helping the town to identify problems that then the Vision Zero task force can seek to remedy. Diving into some of that initial screening, DOT has a ton of information available online. It is completely free to access. You don't even need a login or anything. 2 of those pieces of information shown on here that I mentioned would be used in addition to the town-specific comprehensive transportation plan and safety action plan that we've prepared. We have a total crash frequency by intersection. This is limited to NCDOT roadways. However, for non-motorist crashes, which include pedestrians and bicyclists, it's across the state. So anyone can log in and view this information, and this is very helpful in addition to the 2 documents that I've already mentioned in identifying corridors such as Hodge Road or Knightdale Boulevard that experience a number of crashes, perhaps more typical than similar roadways elsewhere in the state. So there was a question regarding study area that was received during the work session, so I just wanted to speak to that really quickly. The question was that should there be a definitive study area mentioned as part of this text amendment, similar to the way that the bicycle and pedestrian analysis defines a half-mile buffer. And to that, I've used Linden Oaks as an example, not to pick on them. They came through the process before any of these were requirements, but just to illustrate an example of how this buffer could impact the text amendment. So shown in blue would be that half-mile buffer from their site driveways, which would extend almost to the bridge over I-40 on Old Phasian Road, and it would extend to the south on Bethlehem Road. The red dots are the study area intersections from the traffic impact, or the transportation impact analysis, sorry, including there's another study area that's further south on Bethlehem Road that isn't shown here. So this is showing how those two, a defined buffer area versus a subjective one that is negotiated between staff, DOT, and the applicant, don't necessarily match. And the reason why a definitive buffer area could be a problem is if we look at the safety action plan, our hotspot and high injury network map, there's areas along Hodge Road, the interchange with I-87, and over on over to the east there, where there's a serious injury crash that would not be captured within that fixed buffer. So open to feedback, but I think there's value in not setting a cap on the extents that we're looking out. So with that tonight, I know this might be a little early. I will plan to bring an actual amended UDO for review to LURB and to council next month, but I do have a draft of the proposed amendment to the UDO shown here on screen. So it's really just touching 2 sections. It would be section 12.3.j.2.a, which is the procedures of the TIA scoping meeting, to add this in as another thing that can be required. Same wording as was done with the bicycle and pedestrian analysis. And then in section 12.3.j.4, the other factors to include, this is actually describing what it would be that would largely produce what was shown as that Raleigh example there, just with all those extra things like the severity index, looking at bicycle pedestrian crashes, and trying to make more of a recommendation from it rather than just producing a report. And so again, just to summarize, there are 2 more steps after this coming to LURB and council next month, pending no major changes needed. And that concludes my presentation for tonight. So I welcome any questions that council or LURB has at this time.
Thank you so much. Bringing it to council. Any questions?
I guess, well, a comment. I really love the thoroughness of this, and I think that it bodes extremely well with our current zero, what is it? Action zero.
Vision Zero?
Yeah, Vision Zero. There you go. So, as this being optional or not a mandatory requirement of TIA, is it just prompted based upon staff's determination, looking at the data triggers of where there is possible hotspots as to when a developer would have to provide this as a part of the TIA?
Yes, that is correct. So it would either would fall to town transportation staff, which is myself, or the land use administrator, typically Kevin or Gideon, to require this. And the point of that being that if I go back to, I broke it, I'm sorry. I was going the wrong way. Yeah, well, that's happening. There are areas within town that are not on our high injury network, towards the edges of our jurisdiction, say Pool Road, as you get closer to heading towards Wendell. There's not, as we can see on the bottom of those maps there's no color there. Towards the top of the map, there's less color. We know generally where problems are, and so just to not create unnecessary burden on every single development, especially ones that are smaller in nature.
If I understood what you presented correctly, the Raleigh version has NCDOT-free information. The Cary version had proprietary software. Do we know what type of software?
It has a name. I don't remember what it is. It's a fancy acronym. They are the only municipality in North Carolina that uses it. I'm pretty sure they developed it themselves. Both use this publicly available information from NCDOT. The maps that are shown at the bottom there and on this screen here, this is not the information that's necessarily used to make the crash data analysis reports. There is a software called the Traffic Engineering Accident Analysis System, TEAS. This kind of merges with the DMV's software where every single crash has a crash report and is fed into this system, and you can use that program to generate, with whatever criteria you've specified, a 5-year window on Old Phasian Road, you can pull every single crash that occurred during that time. It's typically requested from DOT. Those applicants that are pre-qualified with DOT can obtain that information themselves, but that information that feeds into the report is not publicly available.
Any additional?
Sorry. I do have a question, but I moved because the air conditioning is right there, and I was becoming an ice cube. Can you go to the one where you categorized the crashes, that example one?
I think I'm going the wrong direction. Nope.
That.
There.
26% of the crashes are categorized as other. That seems to not be very helpful information because other can cover a whole lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I see in the bottom it says a lot of them are primarily side swipes. This is just an example that like Raleigh uses.
So, yes. So this is an example. So I worked on the private side for a number of years before coming with the town. This was an example that I prepared for the city of Raleigh. They don't have specific fill out this table. They have, conduct this crash study. This is something that they had commonly accepted. That other is a catch-all for about maybe 8 other types of crashes that were all individually, a small percentage.
Okay, I see.
You could certainly expand this table to have more categories.
Right. Just other, having 26%, like fully a fifth of it or a fourth of it categorized as other, just didn't seem very helpful. My second question was about the severity. Does the NCDOT data capture the severity of the crash as well?
It does, yes.
Okay.
So this map here on the left there, it's just color-coded by quantity, but if you were to click on one of those dots, this is GIS.
I see. Okay,
it would
I see.
break down the severity for you, as well as the reports that get generated from that software from DOT will spit out, how many of those 50 crashes were fatal, how many were serious, how many were minor injuries, how many were just property damage only, just a busted headlight.
Okay. I saw the raw number of crashes, and I was like, if you want them to give you severity, but the NCDOT doesn't give it to them, how will they get it? But they have it, so never mind. Thank you.
Quick question. You had mentioned that you can also pull data from the DMV. How much of this will be captured for non-NCDOT roads? Like, I don't know the percentage of non-NCDOT owned roads in Knightdale, but will this capture those roads with those crashes as well?
Yes, so
Okay.
this captures any publicly maintained road. So if somebody gets into a fender bender in a Target parking lot, that is just considered a PVA or a private vehicular area. That's treated differently, and even in terms of insurance, but that is not captured in these reports, unfortunately. But if you're driving along, any town-owned roadway, it will be captured as well.
Thanks for clarifying.
Thank you. All right. At this time, we will open the floor for public comment. And is there anyone here tonight who wishes to speak on this item? If so, you may come forward at this time. If not, we'll bring it back for any final comments or questions.
I'll make a motion, if there are no comments, to close the public hearing, refer ZTA 1-26 to the Land Use Review Board for review and recommendation.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Majority approves, motion carries. Well, that leads us to adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Majority approves, motion carries. Stand adjourned. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, LURB members, for joining us. Have a good evening.